Numerous studies find listening to be the most important communication skill for entry-level workers, subordinates, supervisors, and managers on several dimensions: job and career success, productivity, upward mobility, communication training, and organizational effectiveness. Executives spend nearly 60% of their communication time listening. Did you hear that? Now, in a book called Communicating Today, written by Dr. Raymond Zuchner, he claims somewhere in the neighborhood of about 75% of our communication behavior is automatic. People come up, push our buttons, we're like a jukebox, we reach up, grab that record, give it a spin. I'd like you to scratch the records. So you have a different way you respond than how you typically would react. So there's 5 different ways we can respond. Now, if it's advising and evaluating, usually the first thing out of our mouth is you should or you ought to. You know, if I were you, this is what I would do. Then the second one, analyzing and interpreting. You know what's going on here. You know what your problem is? You know why you feel that way? Now, those first 2 you'll find are pretty easy to fill out. Then the next one, reassure and supporting response. I believe. And then you give them credit for a job-related skill or credit for a personal trait you appreciate about them. So you have good common sense, or you catch on to things quickly, you work real hard, something like that. And then the next one are what or how questions, questioning and probing, what and how, no wrong answers. And then the last is paraphrasing and understanding. If I understand you correctly, because we know 3 out of 4 times we don't. It's more intellectual conversation, you're thinking. If it's more emotional, feeling, you got to see if you can demonstrate that you are seeking to understand them better. So you have a little story here, and I'm going to ask you to script with the people at your table these 5 different responses. When working adults were asked to name the most common communication behavior observed in their place of business, listening topped the list. Listening is free, however, it can really cost us personally and professionally if we aren't good at it. In this presentation, I share a wide variety of strategies for effective listening. This presentation is quite interactive. I give participants plenty of opportunities to polish their listening skills through short activities and exercises. It is a lot of fun, and people accidentally learn quite a bit. Now, I've noticed you're awfully good listeners, and I want to make sure I provide you some strategies to make sure you always are an active, effective listener, because there is a big difference between adequate listening and active listening. So these are the 4 stages I want you to keep in mind. Number 1 is to be prepared, both physically and psychologically. So if you knew you were going to be sitting through this presentation today, you maybe have gotten a little bit more sleep last night, or maybe had a good breakfast, or made sure you had some coffee or some Diet Mountain Dew to stay perky. So you got to be prepared physically, but also psychologically. So since we're talking about listening, you might have wanted to ask yourself some questions and reflect of when do I start to not follow along in a meeting, when do I tend to drift off, or what are some of my listening habits that people point out that I could improve, so you're psychologically prepared for the information we're sharing. And then you also need to stay involved, asking questions and jotting down notes and, being active in the presentation today and with the people that you're sharing ideas with at your table. And then keep an open mind. Listen till I'm completely done. Listen comprehensively. Listen cooperatively, and try to just take in the information and then sort through it later, what you'd like to practice and what you'd like to put into play. And then the last would be to review and evaluate. Review and evaluate your performance as a listener for the time we shared together, but also review and evaluate your performance going forward. So in the meeting that you struggle with paying attention, when you do seem bored with some of the work that you do and some of the conversations you have, make sure you review and evaluate the information we shared. A distinction can be made between adequate listening and active listening. A person can listen adequately, get through the day, follow instructions fairly well, take sufficient notes, and get along with coworkers. But we can improve in nearly every area and gain the respect of our coworkers and our customers.